Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Bacon. Welcome to the show, y'all. Hope is a dangerous thing in a place like this. It's a flicker of light in a pitch black room, and it'll make you break your own damn neck trying to reach it. Most of the old heads in here, the ones doing life, they learned a long time ago to just let that flicker die out. It's easier that way. You just do the time. You become a part of the concrete. This story is about a man who had made that peace. His name was Manny. He was 20 years into a life sentence for a drug deal that went bad. A man died. It wasn't Manny's bullet, but he was there. And in the eyes of the law, that was enough. He was in his 50s now, a quiet, respected figure on the block. He wasn't a shot caller. He wasn't a politician. He was just a fixture. The guy who ran the library card, who could get you a book, who would listen to your story without judgment. He had accepted his fate. He was going to die in this cage. He had a daughter on the outside, a woman he barely knew. She was just a kid when he went in. Now she was a grown woman with kids of her own. They wrote sometimes, but the letters were stilted, awkward. He was a ghost in her life. A story she told her children. He had made his peace with that too, or so he told himself. The routine of the prison was his life. The 5 a.m. count, the child line, the library, the yard. Every day the same, a slow grinding repetition designed to erase the man you used to be. And Manny had let himself be erased. It was a form of survival. Then a new fish landed on his tier. A young buck named Ghost. Ghost was different. He wasn't a scared kid. He was arrogant. He walked onto the block like he owned the place, a cold, dead look in his eyes that said he'd already seen it all. And worse, he was a product of the new streets, a generation that had no code, no fear, no soul. They put him in the cell next to Manny. And Ghost liked to talk. He liked to brag. He'd lie on his bunk at night, the only sound the distant hum of the prison, and he would spin tales of his life on the outside, stories of violence, of money, of a cold and casual disregard for human life. Manny mostly just tuned him out. He'd heard 1,000 stories like this. Every new fish wanted to be a king. They all learned soon enough that in here, you're just a number. But one night, Ghost told a different kind of story. He was high on some prison-made hooch, his voice a low, boastful whisper. You know, old man, he said, the cops ain't as smart as they think they are. There's a body out there they ain't never gonna find. A body I put there myself. Manny stayed quiet, but he was listening now. Ghost laughed, a low, ugly sound. It was years ago. A girl, a witness in a case against my old crew. She thought she was going to talk, but I talked to her first. He started to tell the story, the details pouring out of him, fueled by the booze in his own and monstrous ego. He told Manny the name of the girl. He told him where he had taken her, a deserted stretch of woods upstate. He told him how he had done it, and he told him where he had buried her. No one ever found her, Ghost whispered, a triumphant glee in his voice. They just thought she ran. A cold case, a ghost, and I'm the only one who knows where the body is buried. Manny lay on his bunk, his heart a cold, hard knot in his chest. He didn't say a word. He just listened, and he remembered every single and damning detail. That night, the flicker of hope he thought had died in him years ago, it sparked back to life. It was a small, dangerous, and terrifying flame. Ghost had just given him a story that could be a key to the cage he had long ago accepted as his final home. But he knew that using that key would mean becoming the one thing he had never been, a snitch. And in the brutal world of the prison, that was a price that could cost him more than just his time. It could cost him his life. The story Ghost told him was a poison seed. It took root in Manny's mind and it started to grow. A dark and tempting weed in the barren soil of his life sentence. He spent the next few days in a daze, his mind a chaotic battlefield. On one side was the code, the one and only law that mattered in this world. You don't talk to the police, ever. It was the first and last commandment of the convict's Bible. To break it was to commit social suicide, to become a rat, a pariah, a dead man walking. On the other side was the flicker of hope, the possibility of a life outside these walls, the chance to see his daughter again, to meet his grandchildren, the chance to die a free man, to be buried in the earth, not in a prison cemetery. It was a dream he had long ago packed away, and now it was back, a tantalizing and terrifying ghost. He watched Ghost in the yard, the young killer walking with that arrogant swagger. He saw the casual cruelty in his eyes, the complete and utter lack of a soul, and he thought of the girl, the one he had buried in the woods, a ghost, just like his father. This wasn't just about getting out anymore. It was about justice, a word that had lost all meaning to him, but that now, in the face of Ghost's unrepentant evil, started to feel real again. He had to make a choice between the convict's code and his own conscience, between the loyalty to a world of broken men and the loyalty to a world of innocent victims. It was a choice that tore him apart. He knew the risks. If he talked and word got out, he was a dead man. The prison has its own way of dealing with rats, and it is a slow and painful one. But if he stayed silent, he would be an accomplice in Ghost's crime. He would be protecting a monster, and he would be condemning himself to die in this cage with the knowledge that he had held the key to his own freedom and had been too much of a coward to use it. He thought of his daughter. He looked at the faded picture of her he kept in his cell. She was a woman now, with a life of her own. But in his mind, she was still the little girl who had cried the day they sentenced him. He had already lost her childhood. He didn't want to lose the rest of her life too. He made his decision. He was going to talk, but he had to do it smart. He couldn't just go to the guards. That was a death sentence. He had to find a way to get the information out without leaving a trail that led back to him. He had to be a ghost himself. He started by building a relationship with the prison chaplain, a good and decent man who he knew could be trusted. He didn't tell him the whole story. He just started talking about his own case, about his regrets. He planted the seed of his own and profound desire for redemption. Then, during a private counseling session, he made his move. He told the chaplain that he had overheard something, a rumor, about an old cold case. He was careful. He didn't give up Ghost's name. He just gave him the details of the murder, the girl's name, the location. He framed it as a crisis of conscience, as something that was weighing on his soul. The chaplain listened, his face a mask of a grave concern. He knew what this was. He knew the danger Manny was putting himself in, but he also knew that he couldn't ignore it. "Are you sure you want to do this, Manny?" he asked. "You know the risks." Manny just nodded. "I just want to do the right thing, chaplain," he said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. "I just want that poor girl's family to have some peace." The chaplain agreed to make an anonymous call to the state police. He would pass on the information as a rumor he had heard within the walls. Manny had done it. He had set the wheels in motion. He had betrayed the convict's code, and now all he could do was wait and pray that the ghost he had just unleashed would not come back to haunt him. The anonymous tip from the chaplain was a spark in a cold, dead fire. It landed on the desk of a state police detective, a man named Russo, who was 2 years from retirement and had a reputation for being a dog with a bone. He pulled the old case file, the one on the missing girl that Ghost had talked about. It was thick with dead ends and unanswered questions. But the details in the tip, they were too specific to be a coincidence. The location in the woods, the manner of death, it was information that only the killer or someone who had talked to the killer could know. Russo went to the woods, and after 2 days of digging, they found her. A skeleton buried in a shallow grave just where the tip had said she would be. The cold case was now a hot one. The news hit the prison like a lightning bolt. The story was on every TV in every day room. A body found, a cold case reopened. Manny watched the news report, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He saw the relief on the girl's parents' faces, the tears of a grief that had finally found a resting place. And for a moment, he felt a flicker of something that felt like pride. He had done a good thing. But then he saw a ghost. He was watching the same report, and his face was a mask of a cold and dawning fury. He knew that there was only one person in this world who he had told that story to. Manny. The air on the tier changed overnight. Ghost didn't confront him. He was too smart for that. He just watched him. His eyes were a constant and menacing presence in the yard, in the child line, in the cell block, and in those eyes Manny saw his own death warrant. The other inmates felt it too. They started to keep their distance from Manny. The rumor was on the yard now. Manny was a snitch. The code had been broken, and there was a price to be paid. Manny was in a living hell. He had the feds on the outside, digging into a murder, and he had a killer on the inside, plotting his own. He was a man caught between two worlds, and both of them wanted a piece of him. He went to the chaplain, his face a mask of a quiet and desperate terror. "He knows," he said. "Ghost knows it was me." The chaplain knew he had to do something. He called Detective Russo. He told him about the situation, about the threat to Manny's life. Russo came to the prison. He met with Manny not in an interrogation room, but in the chapel. He laid it out for him. "We know he's your man," Russo said, "but we can't make a case without you. The story he told you, that's not enough for a conviction. We need you to testify. It was the final and most dangerous step, to go from a whisperer to a witness, to stand up in open court and point the finger. It would make him a hero in the eyes of the law, and it would make him a dead man in the eyes of every convict in the country." Russo offered him a deal. "You testify, we get you a sentence reduction, a big one. Maybe even time served, and we put you in the witness protection program. A new name, a new life." It was the dream he had been chasing, the key to the cage. But the price was a permanent and public betrayal of the only world he had ever known. He had to make a choice between a life in a cage of concrete and steel, and a life in a different kind of cage, a cage of fear, of a new name, of a past that would always be hunting him. It was a choice between two kinds of death, and he had to decide which one he was willing to live with. Manny sat in that quiet chapel, the weight of his choice pressing down on him. He thought of his daughter. He thought of the life he could have on the outside, a real life. And then he thought of the yard, of the cold, hard eyes of the men he lived with, of the brutal and unforgiving justice of the convict's code. To be a snitch, it was a fate worse than death. It was a permanent stain on your soul, a brand that you could never wash off. You would be a ghost, a pariah, not just in this prison, but in every prison for the rest of your life. But what was the alternative? To die in this cage? To let a killer like Ghost walk free? to let the hope that had been so unexpectedly reawakened just die. He looked at Detective Russo, at the calm and patient look on his face, and he made his decision. He chose life, as complicated and as dangerous as it might be. "All right," he said, his voice a dry whisper, "I'll testify." The feds moved fast. They pulled Manny out of the prison that same day, put him in a special protective custody unit at a federal facility. He was a ghost now, his name erased from the prison rolls. Ghost knew what had happened. The disappearance of his accuser was a confirmation of his betrayal. The rage of a cornered animal began to build in him. He put the word out on the prison grapevine, a bounty on Manny's head, $10,000 to the man who could silence the snitch. Manny spent the next 6 months in isolation prepping for the trial with the federal prosecutors. He told his story over and over again until the words lost all meaning. He was a weapon, and they were sharpening him for the kill. The trial was a high-stakes game of chess. Ghost had a high-priced lawyer who tried to tear Manny apart on the stand. He painted him as a desperate, lifelong criminal, a man who would say anything, do anything to get out of prison. He tried to turn Manny's own history against him, but Manny just told the truth. He told the jury what Ghost had told him, the brutal and chilling details of the murder, and his testimony, combined with the forensic evidence from the body, was a powerful and undeniable combination. The jury was out for less than a day. The verdict came back: guilty, first-degree murder. Ghost was sentenced to life without parole. He was going to die in a cage. As they led him away, his eyes met Manny's across the courtroom. And in that one final look, a promise was made, a promise of a cold and patient and unending revenge. Manny had won the battle, but the war he knew was far from over. Manny was a free man, kinda. They gave him a new name, a new social security number, a new life in a small and anonymous town in the middle of nowhere. He was a ghost, a man without a past. But the past has a way of not letting you go. He lived in a constant low-grade fear. Every new face was a potential threat. Every strange car was a potential hitman. He had escaped the prison of concrete and steel, but he was now living in a prison of his own paranoia. He tried to reconnect with his daughter. He found her living a quiet suburban life. He tried to explain who he was, the man he had been, the choice he had made. But she looked at him like he was a stranger, because he was. The father she had known was a ghost. And this new man with a new name and a new life was just a man. A man with a story she didn't want to hear. The hope of a family reunion, the one that had been the fuel for his impossible choice, died in the quiet and polite distance in his own daughter's eyes. He was truly and finally alone. He had betrayed the only world he had ever known, the world of the convict, for a world that didn't want him. He was a man caught between two lives belonging to neither. And on the inside, Ghost was not a man who forgot. His life sentence had not broken him. It had just focused him. He had a new purpose: to find the man who had put him in this cage and to make him pay. He still had his network on the outside, and he put them to work. He was hunting for a ghost, and he had all the time in the world. Manny had made a choice. He had chosen justice. He had chosen freedom. But he was beginning to realize that some choices don't have a right answer. They just have a price. And he was going to be paying the price for his choice for the rest of his life. The cold case was closed, but his own personal and lifelong case was just beginning. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.